Hi, it's Dr. Michael McNeil here. It's now the 6th of July, and I've been busy trying to buy equipment and mixers and everything else, trying to get this recording and the sound quality and things working correctly. And I think I might just have, because I've been doing like these videos and talking for an hour, and the audio like just died halfway through or something, and I've been completely oblivious. So now I've got this little thing in the corner that indicates whether I'm speaking, and hopefully that means that it's actually recording, and I can work on it and do post-production or whatever else needs to be done. I'm just trying to get the audio right so that that people can hear, or it's not too there, or it's not got both channels on. It's just been problematic because I had an old mixer and it's sort of like over 10 years old, the whole digital interface, and it seemed to sort of like die halfway through sort of recording. So I've been playing about, this is probably take 3 of trying to sort of get stuff sorted for this video, but that's okay. What I actually wanted to talk about was what I think it's it's come into focus again because of what was gone on in the Middle East with the bombing of Iran by the US supporting Israel. And if you've been watching it, there was a lot of people, particularly on the right, who were sort of like, if you like, the isolationist right, and the conspiracy theory right, and also it's not just on the right; it's also some loonies on the left too. Uh, but the view was, the World War. This is going to precipitate World War III. Most people understand, think when they think of Armageddon. They think, it's going to be in the Middle East. There's, and any war or anything that happens in the Middle East, any war, or any conflict or something, there's always within a few weeks, and sometimes not even within a few weeks, overnight, suddenly you get all the prophecies coming out about the Middle East, and things from Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and the end is coming, the wall of fire. There's we're in the end, and thermonuclear war is coming, and you heard that. If you're all awake at all, people saying we shouldn't be involved in other people's wars, other nation building, and all that stuff. All that stuff's perfectly legitimate. We shouldn't be involved in telling people what to do, and that's one of the most interesting things, isn't it, about sort of like Donald Trump's approach to foreign policy. Recently when he went over there and he was talking to the Arabs, and he was saying, for too long we've come over here and told you how to live and stuff. We're not going to do that anymore. And you think, yeah, that's really positive. And so, but to adopt the position that you can't then, if you're then just not going to get involved in any sort of like conflicts that are over there at all, because the nuclear ambitions of Iran were obvious, and most people make the mistake of actually thinking that, say the Iranians or Arabs, or there's lots of different types of Arabs. There's Jews Arabs and Bedouins, and and that's sort of like a loose collective term as well. But if just for the Iranian view, and Iran has been famous in the last since the Islamic revolution in 1979. They've sponsored Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, which basically almost ran Lebanon. The Lebanese government was so weak, so Israel had sponsored and developed this as their army. They developed and sponsored Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas had an enormous amount of money that had come through. It had come through the UNHCR. That had all come from Europe, and they basically built this enormous underground subterranean military infrastructure. But it was coming from UN sources, and the people who were working at this official UN organization were not, were they weren't just open sympathizers. They were, they were radicals. And that's one of the things Trump did when he came in. They sort of like exposed this and shut down this sort of like source of supply. So so you had the Gazans and Hamas in Gaza, and then in the south you had the Houthis in Yemen, and so Iran was just busy sponsoring this this radical form of Shiite Islam, and the stated aim that their number one aim was to eliminate the state of Israel, and not just eliminate the state of Israel in this particular type of jihad. Say, for example, that Hamas believe in. It wasn't just obliterate Israel. It was to globalize the Intifada and get rid of all Jews everywhere. That's what to globalize the Intifada actually means, is to get rid of Jews everywhere, and to overthrow Western civilization and to bring in an Islamic caliphate. That's what globalize the Intifada means. And so, and it's very interesting at the moment. People are saying that you're seeing this joining together of the green revolution, which is like the Islamic revolution, with the red revolution, which are the Marxists, and that shouldn't be of a too much a surprise if you've studied the history of Marxism, particularly because in the early days of even when Lenin was still alive, and some of the conferences which he actually had Muslim leaders at those conferences, and they were adopting the positions of saying that the class struggle and the overthrow of the within would be culturally specific. So the Islamic revolution would be an expression of the, if you like, the overthrow of the oppressors in that culture. And so this was still very much, this was an idea that was very strong in some of those early communist conferences. The union of Marxism and radical Islam, is a revolutionary Islam, was there, and so was there already. So we shouldn't be that surprised seeing its re-emergence at this point, and it's violently anti-Western. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that on college campuses. We're seeing that, as somebody who's British, there's what's actually happening to our capital city, happening to London at the moment. There's Islam's open. It's violent. It's we have a Muslim mayor of our capital city. There's whole areas where they're trying to announce them as autonomous zones, which basically means areas of Sharia law, and there's other parts of the other major cities. There's a whole block across the centre of the north, which is predominantly Islamic, trying to get it into schools. There's controversies in one of the biggest sins you can commit is to, in certain parts of the left now, is to criticize Islam. So this is a real issue. This is a real cultural issue. And so if you try and isolate yourself and say that's what's going on in the Middle East, or what's going on, what went on in sort of like Iran, it's nothing to do with us, you're adopting a sort of like a particularly Western way of thinking that the people say an Islamic revolutionary doesn't share. And so the reason why you don't want, say, somebody like Iran to actually have a nuclear weapon is because they would be quite happy to use those nuclear weapons, not just against Israel, but it would usher in an era of nuclear terrorism. So even for those of us, in a sense, who are anti-interventionist, and I'm very much of that ilk. I'm not. We've got no business sort of like interfering in other countries, other than to the degree that we actually understand the activities of other countries. If they're going to be destructive to us, or they're going to end up threatening us, and they've already threatened us, and they made particularly in the case of, say, of Israel, and of calling, the America the big Satan and Israel the little Satan. What do you do with Satan? Well, in the Islamic religion, there's a festival where, Satan gets whipped and pillared and in the Hajj every year. And so it's naive in the extreme to think, and even where we've seen mass Muslim immigration into sort of like Western countries, what have we seen? Well, we've seen violence, we've seen murders, we've seen killing, we've seen intolerance, with the magazines, we can all remember the in the France, and what happened to the magazine that had those cartoons of Muhammad and all the violence and stuff. And even in Britain, we suffered sort of like murders. It is murders in London and in Birmingham. We've seen violence, we've seen uprisings, we've seen agitation, we've seen the encampments like they've had in the US. So it's not an abstract cultural idea. So the attack against the reason why there was a need to deal with the Iranian problem was because it wouldn't stay in Iran. It might have been Israel first target. Second target would be Western interests around the world, and you would have an era of nuclear terrorism. So regardless of where you think, regardless of where you sit, there is a logic, and you do need to deal with that type of threat. And that's why the US got involved, because they fully appreciated that threat. Okay, so that's, if you like, that's a little bit of my political view there. But if we're talking about sort of what's interesting, I think, is the amount of, if you sort of like, you go back and you see the cultural cynicism of, say, of the late 80s, and because when this was sort of like happening, people immediately say, oh, this is the end, the thermonuclear war, we're going to, this is the end. And you hear that in Christian circles. But if you look at Hollywood in the late 80s, you had sort of like some of the great films, all the Arnie films, Terminator, Total Recall. They were very culturally cynical, and there was lots of these sort of apocalyptic films, and within the Christian world, there was Rapture fever. It was the time of Rapture fever. If you remember, Israel was re-established in 1948, and if you read the great chapters of Jesus talking about the last days, it's Matthew 24 to 26, and one of the phrases that appears there is that this generation will not pass away until all things have been seen. And so there was the Reformation, if you like, the Reformation of the State of Israel in 1948 was seen to be a prophetic marker, if you like. And then you've got a generation after that. Now, in the Bible, historically, a generation was 40 years. So 1948 plus 40 gives you 1988. And it was Rapture fever time. The Rapture is this particular view. There's three main eschatological views. There's like what's called a premillennialist view, an amillennialist view, and a postmillennialist view. Now, pre, a, and post, the prepositions, pre means before, a means none, and post means after. And that should give you sort of like the idea, because in Christian theology, there's this idea of a millennial period. Historically, in some views of the church, some views of scripture and of the end times, there's this idea that there's this millennial period, and so if you are the problem with these terms is that some of the meaning of what is the millennium, it changes depending what it's a function of your what you mean when you say, if I'm a premillennialist, the term millennium means, say, something different to somebody who was like an amillennialist. The millennium still has meaning to an amillennialist, but it doesn't mean a literal period of time. For a premillennialist, the millennium means literally a period of 1,000 years. For an amillennialist, it doesn't mean a literal period at all. That's a figure of, say, if you understand anything about, say, numerology and numbers, and 10 times 10 times 10, so is 100 times, that's like a perfect period of time. So this 10 by 10 by 10 is just like a perfect unspecified period of time, what you might call it the church age. And so the amillennialist doesn't believe in, say, like there's going to be a special 1,000-year kingdom where Jesus reigns on the earth. It's really very much transferred into the church age. The church age is the person is the reign of Jesus on the earth, and so Jesus is reigning now through the church on earth. Now, regardless of what the merits or the ups or downs or whatever you consider that view, that's just the basic definition of it. Now, the post-millennialist view, some people would say that the post-millennialist view is a particular interpretation of the amillennialist view historically, post-millennialism might have been seen to have come out of amillennialism, but post-millennialist basically means that there will be that Jesus will return at the end of the millennial period, rather than that at the beginning, like the premillennialists would believe, and that the church would become so glorious and govern so well that Jesus returns, and if you like, the church is giving and presenting to Jesus the earth. So you can see how there's some sort of connection with amillennialism there of there being like a church age, but for the amillennialist, that's a non-specific period, whereas for the post-millennialism, no, there is a millennial period, and Jesus returns at the end of that period, and it's during the millennium that the church government grows and the power grows. Whereas so for the premillennialist, this is where the characteristics of premillennialism is that the premillennialist believes that there's this 7-year period of where the world becomes so dark, and basically that it's the period of the Antichrist, and but premillennialists believe in this thing called the Rapture, where the church is removed. If you think of the story of regardless of what you think of the historicity of the text, I've got no problem with the story of Noah and the flood and the earth. I think they're perfectly, there's so much empirical evidence that there was a catastrophic major flood. If you've done any studies of anthropology, this idea of an enormous flood appears in all the different cultures in their oral histories of there. So there was some sort of flood, and whether or not Moses gave a specific interpretation to this flood is another matter. That's a discussion you can have, but there definitely was a flood. And the picture is that if you consider that there was an ark built, and the ark became the safe place where civilization was preserved, and so the premillennialist believes in the rapture, that the rapture is something very, very similar. It's like that the believers are removed out of the world at that time, and translated into a waiting place in heaven, so for want of a better term, and then they are, that preserves, if you like, then judgment comes on the earth, very much similar to what happened in the period of Genesis. If you like, the Noah and his family, symbolic of the church, are removed, and then judgment comes on the earth, and the earth was flooded and destroyed. And so the premillennialist very much believes that the rapture is this time where the church is removed, and then there's this 7-year period. If there's three different sub-varieties of premillennialism, where some believe the rapture happens at the beginning of the 7 years, some believe in the middle, and some believe at the end. And so but there's the period of where the earth becomes so rotten and sinful, and that the Antichrist, this false Christ period, appears during the 7 years, but the rapture removes the true church, and then at the end of that period, for the premillennialist, the devil is then thrown into the fire, and this glorious period of the millennium begins. Jesus reigns on the earth, destroys all his enemies, and then you get, after the 1,000 years, you get the final judgment, and then eternity begins. Whereas for the amillennialists, that's actually happening at the moment. And if you like, the connection between amillennialism and premillennialism, it's very much for the amillennialists, the postmillennialists, there is obviously a connection there, because they both believe there's that the church is manifesting the government of God on the earth. But for the amillennialist, this is, if you like, we're already in eternity. Whereas for the postmillennialists, still, they believe that the church develops its government throughout this period, and at the end, eternity begins. So it's very much whether the starting point of where eternity happens. But for the for the premillennialists, the significance of the nation of Israel was key. And so when they were interpreting these passages, say in Matthew, where it says you've got there after a generation, which would be 40 years, then all these things would be completed. So it suggests, if you like, that's it. The rapture's coming in 1988, 89. And I have actually got recordings and tapes done from that period, where people are actually screaming and jumping up and down and celebrating that they believe the rapture's coming within a matter of weeks. And the people who are actually doing it as well are people who are sane. They would be otherwise people that I would be very much recommend. But it was amazing how strong at that time that people really, really believed that the rapture was absolutely imminent. So on the Hollywood side, you had all these apocalyptic things, but on the Christian side, if you like, the religious side, you had people who were equally saying, right, the end's here. It's very much apocalyptic. The word apocalyptic comes from the Greek word apocalypto. In fact, apocalypse. They're both sort of like transliterations of the Greek word, and it means the unveiling of something that's previously been hidden. So Mel Gibson did a film, didn't they? Did the Apocalypto. That's why I'm getting confused there. That was the one set in Central America, the destruction of the civilization there. And but this word, sort of like apocalypsis, which is the Greek word, basically means an unveiling of something that's previously been hidden. So the apocalypse, if you like, is the unveiling of the into the future age. And so it's very much how so you had this amazing fever pitch at the end of the 80s, both of on the one hand, sort of like the prophetic, going into thinking it's the rapture time and that's it, we're just about off. It's 40 and one generation after 1948. State of Israel was reformed in 1948. We're just about out of here. And then you had all this sort of like great cultural cynicism and negativity within Hollywood. And so it was a real time where people were so focused. And you will see that obviously there was actually somebody who used to be a NASA scientist who wrote a book. I think it was called 1,988 Reasons Why Jesus Will Return in 1988. Of course, Jesus didn't return in 1988. And so he recalculated and reissued the book of 1,989 Reasons Why Jesus Will Return in 1989. And then I think there was another one, which I don't know if it was 1993. The same guy with 3 different books. So you can see this idea of the rapture really, really grabs sort of like people. And so, but you've obviously got a problem there. So how do you interpret this?